Hey everybody, in this video, we're going to talk all about mockups. We'll talk about a strategy for mockups for your Etsy print-on-demand shop, as well as all the different sources of product mockups that I use for my Etsy print-on-demand business. All right, so I get questions about mockups all the time in the comments on other YouTube videos on the POD Insights channel. So I thought it'd be a good idea just to make a video kind of all about the mockup strategy that I use for my shop. And I want to start things off by talking about your mockup strategy. There's something that you should think about, just like a lot of other things with your print-on-demand business, before you go too far down one path, because if you change your mind at some point, you may need to redo a lot of the work you already did. But thankfully, this shouldn't be a really hard decision because it's really just going to be about what is the strategy of your print-on-demand shop. What we need to do is really just consider, is your shop strategy focused around building a brand, like a consistent brand image that brings people to your shop homepage, coming back to your business, or are you primarily a business that gets found through search, meaning you'll sell any type of design, you don't really make a lot of repeat sales, or at least the core of your sales are not coming from people going to your shop page and browsing everything. It's really that you're trying to sell through search results. If you didn't notice in the background, I brought up an example here. I have no affiliation with this shop. It's just one that I came across that I thought was a good example of more of a focused brand image. So this shop has a consistent look to all of their mockups. They're using a lot of the same mockup for their different t-shirt design products, and they have a few other products mixed in here, some sweatshirts. And what I'm seeing is maybe like 3 or 4 different primary mockups that they are using over and over again. And as long as those primary mockups are good quality mockups, then it is perfectly fine to use them over and over again. You don't have to have every single listing have the exact same primary thumbnail, but it's okay to, pick a core set of like 3 or 4 different ones to use for t-shirts and just use those for all your listings. Now, this shop doesn't only make designs in one particular niche, but if you did, that would be yet even another reason to have a consistent look and feel to your mockups. Whereas if you're doing more of a general print-on-demand store like I do, where you get most of your views, clicks, and sales through search results and not really so much about the shopping from the homepage and repeat sales, then it doesn't matter quite so much that all of your mockups look consistent, have the same look and feel. People are generally not shopping as much from your homepage. They're finding your designs specific niches through search results. So consider those things. What's your shop strategy? And are you trying to build that consistent look and feel to the brand of your shop? So if that's going to be your strategy, let's talk about the options you have and how to make some mockups for your products. And then we'll talk about doing it for a more general store second. One of the most common ways to make consistent mockups where you have that sort of like core set of 3 or 4 for each type of product you sell and then just reuse them over and over is actually to get mockup images from other Etsy sellers that sell digital downloads. I just searched for Bella Canvas 3001 mockup. You would want to search for whatever type of product you're going to sell, because you want the mockup to be an accurate representation of the product itself as well as the design. So if you're selling Bella Canvas 3001, then search for that. If you're selling Gildan Soft Style, search for that. If you're selling Comfort Colors, search for that. You will find a very wide range of different mockups here. The thing is, just look for a style that feels like it fits the brand image you're trying to build. So for example, if this first one here from this shop, I'm familiar with this shop. I've bought a couple of their mockups before myself. If this is something that it looks like the look and feel is going to fit your brand, maybe go to that shop page and see what all of their different collections are. See if they offer any of these bundles and check out the pricing on those. Sometimes you can get a pretty good deal on like all of the color variations for a particular product. But let's say you found, 3 or 4 of the Bella Canvas 3001 that you thought like, these are going to be my core 3 or 4 at $250 a piece. It's not crazy expensive, especially if you're going to reuse it over and over again for a long time. And Etsy is certainly not the only place to get these. If you have a subscription to a site like Creative Fabrica, you can also find some mockups like this there. So for example, on Creative Fabrica, I searched for the same thing, Bella Canvas 3001, and there are some mockups here. So if you already have a subscription to a service like Creative Fabrica, this can be another place where you might find some mockups that could be a good fit, and then you don't have to pay anything more than you already do for the subscription. By the way, any resources I mentioned in this video, there will be a link in the description. All right, but whether you pay for some individual mockups like this from another Etsy seller who makes them, or whether you get them from a resource like Creative Fabrica, regardless, what you're going to get is either a PNG or a JPEG file, and then it's up to you to actually create the mockups from that. And there are a ton of different ways that you can do it. Really, it just depends on what software you normally use for your designing. If you use Photoshop, then you can certainly use Photoshop to make your mockups. If you use Canva, you can use Canva. Whatever software you use can use it for the mockups too. But for example, if you use Canva to make your designs, all you have to do is create a new design. I would recommend making your mockups at least 2,000 by 2,000 pixels when you create a new mockup, or if you save sort of like a project file as a template to create your mockups. I'd recommend doing at least 2,000 by 2,000 because Etsy likes the images to be at least that size. Then all you have to do is upload the file that you purchased for your mockups, as well as the design file if you don't already have that in Canva or whichever software you're using. All right, so here's an image that we got to use as one of our core mockups. I would recommend getting at least black, white, and maybe one of the gray tones, whatever you know you're gonna be selling consistently on most of your listings. So this is my option for a black t-shirt. I'm just gonna fill up the space of the canvas here. And if you get a mock-up that is more horizontal, more of a landscape aspect ratio, you can always resize your canvas. As long as it's a minimum of 2,000 by 2,000, then it will look nice on Etsy. It doesn't have to be perfectly square. By the way, if you're using Photoshop to do this process right here, I do have a separate video all about a script that you can use where each of your color options is a separate layer in Photoshop, and all you have to do is put your design file as the top layer, and then the script will automatically export each layer as its own separate mockup on different color options. If that's something you're interested in checking out, I'll put a link to that video in the description and in the corner. All right, so all we need to do now is grab one of our t-shirt designs that we need to make a mockup for. All right, so here's a design that is a holiday Christmas theme here, and let's just place this on the shirt. Now, there's really only one important thing that you do here. Try to make the sizing and placement of the design as close as possible to the way the product is going to look. Now, that doesn't mean you need to have a sample. All you need to do is go to your print-on-demand platform and look at the previews or the mockups that they provide you. Now, I'm not planning on using these in my listing because they have a plain white background, but I can use these as a reference for the sizing and the placement. Use things like the neckline of the shirt and look down, straight down, and see, does your design extend outside of the neckline on either side? Or is it completely within the center? Where is it in reference to the armpits of the shirt in terms of the height? Things like that, and how far away is it from the bottom of the neckline? Use those reference points as a guide and then come back to your mockup and size it appropriately. The main thing is you're just trying to avoid setting the wrong expectations. So for example, if I did this would not be an accurate representation of the way this product's actually gonna come out. That wouldn't be great. So do your best to size it appropriately so it looks as close as possible to that mockup preview that you get from your print-on-demand platform. Now, another thing you certainly can do, and you can go much farther than this if you're using software like Photoshop. If you're using Photoshop and you're sort of a whiz at Photoshop and you do this all the time, you can really make this image look like it is a part of that shirt by blending layers and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Not really necessary for print-on-demand thumbnails, but one thing I do recommend doing is reducing the transparency or the opacity a little bit. So come up, if you're using Canva, to this transparency slider. Bring it down to anywhere from like 90 to 91%. I wouldn't go lower than 90. I'm not really doing this to make it look like it's blending with the shirt so much as I'm just trying to actually dull the colors a little bit. Because remember, these mockups, everything that's going on right now is happening in the RGB color space. When these designs get printed, they're gonna get converted to CMYK. That usually comes out looking a little more dull than it does on the computer screen. So reducing that transparency a little bit just helps to give it a little bit more of a reasonable expectation for the contrast and the poppiness and the richness of the color. And there we go. There's our mock-up on our black t-shirt. Of course, if you wanted to make additional mock-ups for different color options, you can do that. As I referenced earlier, there is a quicker way to do it with Photoshop. But of course, I would recommend, as I mentioned, having a couple of additional ones. So maybe one where somebody's wearing the product. One tip for getting your mock-ups, if you're going to use ones where somebody's wearing them. Let me go back to this shop that sells mock-ups to show you an example here. Here's one I wouldn't recommend buying. This one, while it looks really nice, there are just too many wrinkles in this shirt. The flat area is virtually non-existent, and that makes your mock-up look less realistic. Now, it's okay, like I just mentioned, if your mock-up isn't like super, super realistic, but This just makes it look obviously not realistic. So I would avoid buying ones that look like this. Go for ones that have more of a nice flat area to the front of the t-shirt or the back if your design is on the back. But that doesn't mean you have to avoid mock-ups of a person wearing the product. For example, here's one from a different shop called Moody Mocks. To me, this one has enough of a flat area for you to place your design without it looking totally ridiculous and unrealistic. So you don't have to make it your primary thumbnail if you don't want to. It's really just up to you. Which one do you think looks better and showcases the design better, the one without a person wearing it or the one with? But I do think having at least one of each in the listing in general is a good idea. Just look for ones that don't have a lot of wrinkles or areas that are not flat, because that'll make the mock-up look a lot less natural with the design. All right, so that's an example of a mock-up strategy if your shop is really trying to build a consistent look and feel to the brand, a brand image that you want people to come back and see again. The same thing would apply if you also sell sweatshirts and hoodies. Really same process, just different product. Go for a core set of 3 or 4 mock-ups that you make for every one of your designs, and you'll have some nice consistency as well as just a little bit of variety. Now let's talk about some sources for mock-ups to use if you're doing more of a general strategy where you don't necessarily care about them all looking consistent in the same, because you're mainly getting found through search results. There are a lot more sources out there for mockups that have a huge variety that you can take advantage of if that's your strategy. And then after that, we'll also talk about mugs, because mugs are another very popular item, and thankfully mockups are pretty darn easy with mugs. But first, let's talk about t-shirt and apparel mockups for a general store. Placeit is one of my favorite places to get mockups for my Etsy shop because they make it super easy. They make placement of the design in their images really easy, and they will look really, really realistic with the way that they insert the image into the product. And they've got a ton of different product offerings, from t-shirts to tote bags, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs. They've got most of the types of products that you're gonna look to sell in a print-on-demand shop. They do have a free account. However, the selection of mockups that you can pick from with the free account is limited, and I think it rotates once a month, so they change them up, what's available to you. So you can still get a variety of mockups with the free account, but if you want access to everything as well as their other features, they have other tools as well besides mockups, you will have to get one of the paid accounts. They do have a sale a couple times a year. You could always sign up for the free account and wait till you get, a notification that they're having one of their sales if you want to go for the paid subscription. One thing I should point out about tools like this is you do have to kind of avoid the analysis paralysis effect here, because with so many choices, you can accidentally waste like an hour trying to find just the right mockup for each listing that you create. So the best thing I think to do is to use the filters on the side or search for something a little bit more specific than just looking at the general t-shirt category or the general sweatshirt category, because you'll accidentally be like scrolling for a long time, just like you're on Instagram or something. The process of making your mockups on Placeit is super easy. All you have to do is click on the left option over here to upload your design from your computer, or you can just keep making mockups with ones that you've recently uploaded, because it keeps them in your account. Then you'll always have an option to change the product color over here. So if you need black, you can change it to black. You also can do a custom color. And then when you do the resize option here, you can move around and resize the design. You can see a live mock-up of it, which is behind my head, so you know where it's going. And then when you click on crop, it will adjust your mock-up. Then you can just download each one. But it actually makes them look, I think, a lot more realistic than the method we just used, which again, not the end of the world if it's not the most realistic, but one of the reasons why I like Placeit is it looks super realistic. Now, you can take a similar strategy with Placeit as what we talked about earlier, where maybe you find like 3 or 4 and they're just your favorite ones that you want to keep using over and over again. However, I don't know if it's worth paying for an annual subscription to Placeit just to use the same 3 or 4 mockups every time. So keep that in mind. You can do that, but the reason why I think it's worth it is because of the big variety, and you can pretty much find any mockup to fit any scenario for any type of design. For example, there are Halloween-themed mockups to go with your Halloween designs. There are Christmas-themed mockups to go with your Christmas designs. All of those types of differentiators that you want to have, they've got it here in Placeit. All right, so that's Placeit. The next option that I have for you to keep in mind is Vexels. If you're already a Vexels subscriber, hopefully you already know about their mockup generator tool. If you're not a Vexels subscriber and you want to check it out, of course, there is also a link in the description to that. Now, Vexels is a paid graphics service. I've talked about Vexels in many of my other videos. I'm not going to talk about their graphics in this video because I've done that in other videos. I'll link to a couple in the description. and in the corner if you want to see more about all of the features that Vexels has. But I use their mockup generator tool as well as Placeit. Sometimes they just have one that Placeit doesn't have. Sometimes using their tool is a little faster, but because I already pay for Vexels and use it for their graphics, I just also use the mockup generator tool as well. They don't have quite as big of a catalog of mockups as Placeit does, but you can see they have a lot for t-shirts. They have 613 different ones for t-shirts, 300 for hoodies. They do have some for sweatshirts, throw pillows, tank tops. They even have some leggings and socks and baby onesies. It's just not quite as massive of a catalog as Placeit. They have a huge selection of t-shirt mockups, as I mentioned, and some have this like plain background that you can actually change the color of if you want a solid color background. And some also are like live real environment mockups, so they have more of a realistic context around them. The process, though, is as far as making them is very similar to Placeit. You just upload the file you want. It'll place it right on the shirt. You have a slider to resize it. You can just grab it and move it around to anywhere that you need it. Of course, you can also change the color of the shirt to any color that you need, as far as you can use a hex code, or you can use the selection here to just take the color that you want. And then you can download this in multiple different sizes. You have large, original, and then I wouldn't recommend going smaller than the large size because you'll have dimensions smaller than 2000 pixels. So large or original size should be fine there. But Vexels is another great option to make some really quick mockups, especially if you're already a subscriber and you're just not taking advantage of this. This is a really easy tool to use as well. All right, now let's talk about mug mockups. Mugs are thankfully one of the easier products to make mockups for, and Printify, if you're using Printify, as well as some other print-on-demand platforms, actually already have some usable mockups with them. Now, it's not a bad thing to use the plain white mockup ones, especially if you offer different sizes, just to include one of each size or something, but I would definitely recommend using mostly context mockups for mugs because they're just a lot more realistic looking. Now, there are some that I wouldn't recommend using, at least not all the time. This one's a little bit more of a holiday feel to it. Printify has this one. By the way, this is an 11-ounce white mug from District Photo. The mockups vary slightly. I think there's a couple different ones with the other print providers, but most of them are consistent. This is a Halloween one. Obviously, I wouldn't use this if this wasn't a Halloween design, but the mockups like this one here that shows both sides of the mug in the same mockup, this is actually a perfectly usable one that I usually do publish. Here's another context one that I think is perfectly usable. Here's a good one of somebody actually holding the mug, which doesn't have a background, but it's very easy to add a background to this, as well as it is for the solid white regular background ones. We could download these couple and then use Canva or Photoshop or anything to add our own background and actually get a really nice looking usable mockup. Use the button in the bottom left corner of the screen here to download at least one of the angles of the plain white background, as well as the person holding the mug. So we'll grab those two, and we'll go over to Canva. This one starts again by creating a new design and doing a custom size. And again, for these, I just do 2000 by 2000 pixels, so it's always in my most recent sizes. The first thing we're gonna do is add a background that we wanna use for the plain white mug. So I'm gonna go to Photos here, and I'm gonna search for Table. I'm looking for one that is a little more indoors. Now, I don't know if this one's gonna be perfect, but it's not always perfect on the first try, but we're gonna try this one. So I'm gonna fill out my background. Now, we just need to upload the image of the mug that we downloaded. So we'll upload those two to our account. And this one is going to be for the plain white background of just the mug. So we've got our mug. Now we're going to use the option to remove the background. Now, of course, if you don't have Canva Pro, then you won't have the background remover. So if you don't have Canva Pro, then I would use something like Photopia or something like that, which is free software to remove the background. Chances are if you pay for any graphic software, whatever the program is, it probably has a background remover included in it. Just take advantage of whatever software you have. Photoshop definitely can do this in 1 or 2 clicks. Pretty much anything these days is going to have a background remover, especially if you've paid for it. All right, so there we go. Here's just the mug. And yeah, this is what I was afraid of. See how the angle of the table is not quite perfect? I could use this. Might be okay, but I also don't like the background. There's not enough contrast there for me. So I'm gonna get rid of this one and try again. Now this one's a little better as far as the angle of the table or the counter, because you can see it's a little bit more angled up. I still don't love how much contrast is well, not there because the background's very light colored. You can also make the mug significantly larger here in your mockup and make the background significantly larger as well so that you're getting more of a zoomed in look at the design. And you can always do a little bit of a zoom in on your primary thumbnail on Etsy, but you do want the mug to be really prominent in there because you want the design to be really clear. So the goal really is just search through Canva's available photos and find one that has a table or a countertop that matches the angle. And then once you find a background that works really well for these mockups, again, just save a project file as your mug mockup template. And that way you create a copy each time. You don't have to search for this, and you just upload your new mug design for each mockup that you make. And the benefit of already being in Canva or whatever design software you use is if you want to, you can also add text. So if you want to, drop some text on here that says like available in 11 ounce and 15 ounce sizes, you can certainly do stuff like that as well because you're already here. Now, the one with the person holding the mug is a little bit different. All we really need for that one is something with kind of a blurred background that looks like maybe an interior or something like that. This one actually might be a good example. See how this already has a nice blurry background? Even a background like this, perfectly fine to use. You can also use an outdoor blurry background, pretty much anything. So we'll add that image here and we will get rid of the background for this one too. And then of course we want to make this big enough that it's actually touching the edge so it doesn't look like a floating hand. And there we go. So now you have another perfectly usable mock-up. And this one, I think looks even more realistic than the first one that I made a second ago. So this is a good example of how easy it is to take advantage of one of the mock-ups they provide. Just make it look a lot more realistic. All right, so that's a wrap for this video. That is how I would go about considering your strategy for mockups, whether you have a brand image that you're trying to cultivate, or whether you have a more general shop like me where you just kind of make any design you think will sell, and you kind of have more variety to your mockups. I hope you found this information helpful. Let me know in the comments if it was. Let me know if you have any questions about mockups. Do me a favor and hit the like button if you did find it helpful. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.